Welcome to the City Club of Eugene's September 20th, 2024 program, Should Lane County Revise Its Charter? My name's Andrew Calick, and I'm City Club's president. We're coming to you from our new home at the historic Wow Hall in the heart of downtown Eugene, and it's my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to our speakers and to all of you joining us here in person, online, and over the radio. Since 1990, City Club has been dedicated to our founding mission to build community vision through open inquiry. In accordance with our mission and purpose, we hope to help connect people throughout our community and across identities, generations, experiences, and perspectives. You are invited this week and every week to join us in that effort, to share your wisdom, to learn something new, and to take active steps to make a difference in this city and region that we love. Of course, we cannot do this work alone, so a special thank you to our Platinum Community and Diamond sponsors. The Eugene Area Chamber of Commerce, serving as a catalytic leader in creating a vibrant and diverse economy that drives economic opportunity and well-being. Kaiser Permanente, which exists to provide high-quality, affordable healthcare services and to improve the health of our members and the communities we serve. More information at www.kp.org. The University of Oregon has helped Oregonians question critically, think logically, reason effectively, communicate clearly, act creatively, and live ethically since 1876. More information at uoregon.edu. Lane Community College transforms lives through learning. LCC provides comprehensive, accessible, high-quality educational opportunities that promote student success. For more information, visit lanecc.edu. And thank you to the City of Eugene and to Lane County for their support as well. 45 days to the election, City Club is an essential component of our civic infrastructure, and we're also an entirely volunteer-led nonprofit, and the only city club in Oregon that continues to produce weekly programming. In other words, we need you. Our Summer of Support campaign is happening now through the end of the month. Who says summer's over? So please go to cityclubofueugene.org and give what you can so we can continue to bring this programming to folks from the coast to the Cascades. I'm happy to turn the mic over to KLCC's Rebecca Hanson-White, who will introduce our panelists and moderate today's discussion. Rebecca.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you, City Club. I'm your moderator, KLCC reporter Rebecca Hanson-White. To introduce our panelists, we have Morgan Monroe, a member of Lane County's Charter Review Committee, Stan Long, the author of the proposed redistricting proposal, Lane County Commissioner Lori Trieger, and League of Women Voters President Terry Parker. Our panelists have each been asked to provide an opening statement, after which we'll take a short break and we'll get to questions. So just to start out with, we will have Morgan Monroe up first.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Rebecca and Andrew and everyone for having us to talk about this. I want to start by saying I'm just speaking for myself. I happened to be on the Charter Review Committee, but it wouldn't be appropriate for me to claim to represent the county or the committee. I'm representing myself, and I wanted to start out and say that before we get going. We're going to get to talk about charter amendments today, and I know that may not be the thrillingest subject for some people, but it's really quite important. Our charter is like our county's constitution. The only people who can change it are the voters. There are other portions of county government that our commissioners can change. There's other portions of county practices that staff can change. But the only people who can change the charter are the voters. A couple of years ago, our county decided that we should review our charter on purpose and intentionally and on a regular cycle. And so we created in our community a charter review committee. It is as exciting as it sounds. I'll mind my words here, the committee is a group of community members who are seated by our commissioners, and the committee goes through and reviews the charter in great detail. The most recent Charter Review Committee met over the course of a year. They met a couple of times a month. All of those meetings are public meetings. There was public comment. All the materials are available online. It was a really robust process where that committee went through word by word of our charter to try to evaluate what's still useful, what's become obscure. Occasionally there were terms like, this seems like a historical artifact, that were said in that committee meeting. There were surveys that went out to hundreds of community members who replied. And it's a special soul who replies to a survey from the county asking you to weigh in on whether the charter is formed appropriately and correctly. So if any of you were that person, thank you very much. There are 3 measures on the ballot this fall, that come from the Charter Review Committee process. There's a 4th, and that's the redistricting measure, and I think we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about that redistricting measure. So I want to make sure to talk about the other 3. One of them is about a spending limitation that our county has. Because in 1984, property taxes were levied at a local level. And voters in 1984 said we should have a spending limitation on how much those taxes are as a number. So they picked a number. And an employee of the county since then has taken the time to calculate what that number is adjusted for inflation. Our county has not determined our property taxes since measures 5 and 50 and 47. It's been over 35 years since our county was determining what those property taxes are. But because the only people who can change the charter are the voters, that piece has never been taken out of the charter. So staff, for 35 years since those measures passed, have been spending time to calculate those figures because the charter tells them they have to. So that is one of the measures that's up for repeal this fall. Another measure up for repeal, apparently, some of you will remember this, in the 90s, there was a real concern that someone might turn Alton Baker Park into a golf course, right? Some of you are nodding. And so there's a piece of our charter that says you can't make it a golf course. The county doesn't own that land. That land is shared between the City of Eugene Parks and Rec and Willamette Lane, who's the Springfield Parks and Rec Department. And yet, we still have a portion of our charter that says no golf course for you. So that is one of the measures up for repeal in the charter. The third measure that's up for repeal, you also may remember, there was an effort to put together an income tax at the county level. I think it was in 2007. There were 2 measures on the ballot that year. One said, do you want to create an income tax? The other said, if we create an income tax, or rather, any income tax that we have must be spent in the following ways. Our voters did not approve the creation of an income tax. They sure did approve the limitation of what you would do with an income tax. So we have a portion of our charter that dictates how an income tax that we don't have must be spent. That's the third measure that came through the Charter Review Committee and is on your ballot this fall. And so those are some pieces. I suspect we're going to spend a lot of time on the redistricting measure, but I wanted to highlight those 3. They really speak to the importance of having a charter that will stand the test of time, for having contents in the charter that are relevant and that are directing staff to spend their time well in our county. And I think that the spending limitation one is one of my favorite examples of that, just because we've had someone at the county doing this for 35 years, trying to figure out what this inflation-adjusted number would be. The language in the charter in that section particularly is deeply outdated. It references sources that no longer exist. And so county staff for years have been trying to figure out how do we stay in compliance with this. 2 of these measures were recommended by the 2011 Charter Review Committee for repeal, but did not make it to the ballot. And then the third one was also flagged by them, but they said, maybe we need more information. It is 13 years later, the county determined there's enough information. And so that's what those 3 measures that are on your ballot are for. The only way that you can get a ballot measure in front of the voters is either the county commissioners decide to put it there, because that's something they have authority to do, and the other way is if there's a signature drive. So if you and your colleagues or friends decide, hey, we should change that, you can do that too. All right, thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Stan Long. The first question you ought to be asking is, how does one person get a charter amendment on the ballot? It's pretty simple. I asked the commissioners to put it on the ballot. Why did I do that? Well, I'm a retired, long retired Oregonian. I had a long career in local government and then served in state government I ran 4 different agencies for the state. I was part of that wonderful tradition in Oregon of nonpartisan management at the agency level. I ran the Commerce Department. I ran the Land Conservation and Development Commission. I was in charge of the Justice Department as the Deputy Attorney General, and I was the president of SAFE Corporation. I then went to Wall Street, partly because I couldn't resist the temptation to go to New York. It was a wonderful time. Only a few things would cause me to take a break from retirement and appear in public for the first time in about 15 years. The aspiration for anti-gerrymandering legislation is as old as the country. In his farewell address, the indispensable citizen George Washington tried to remind everyone about the dangers of partisan politics and how it causes public servants to put party loyalty over the development of proper public policy. It's the 3rd most important document in American history. It was printed and taught in schools for years until civics was no longer important enough. So other states are on the move since 1970 to find mechanisms and procedures so that the lines of districts aren't drawn to either favor a political party or protect an incumbent. Those are the 2 twin evils that have bothered most Americans for generations. And of course, computers and software make it possible to gin out maps with great speed. And because redistricting criteria is very broad, it's very difficult to tell whether a change is made for partisan purposes or not. So what's been the remedy in places where the remedy worked? Michigan is the gold standard. Their system is to have somebody other than incumbents do the work. And second, to make sure the people who do the work have no interest in the outcome. Now, it's perfectly legal to have all sorts of conflicts of interest on public commissions. You can have a commission of the players. You could even have a committee of the prison inmates work on security if you thought it would help. But most times in Oregon, we exclude people from public duties if they're involved in the outcome, so they're in effect sitting in judgment of their own cause. You cannot be on a jury in Oregon if you're related to a party in the 4th degree, like your great uncle can't be on your jury, even if he doesn't know you. You can't even be interested in the outcome of a particular legal question and be on a jury in Oregon. You can't have an economic interest with one of the parties. Well, drawing up these maps is a quasi-judicial function. It's like sitting in judgment. You've got all this data, you got this criteria, you're trying to do the right thing. You should not have an interest in the political campaigns you're influencing. Lane County has a committee called an Independent Redistricting Committee that's not independent. It's an all-comers opinion. It's had lobbyists, paid political consultants for active commissioners, drawing the lines that influence elections. It is not illegal, but it is wrong, in my judgment, and it's out of character with the Oregon tradition. So the main thing I did is took the good work of the League of Women Voters on Initiative Petition 14 and dreamed up a list of prohibitions of people who can't serve on redistricting committees. And then I made the commission more strict. Instead of making recommendations to the commissioners, my proposal is that everyday citizens drawn at random, free of conflicting interests, draw the final map. It may look exactly like what we have, but I doubt it. But I'll have a lot more confidence in it, just as I have confidence in jury verdicts that they're not tainted. Now, on the subject of courts, I want to go quickly. One of the things that makes a charter amendment essential is the Supreme Court has said that partisan gerrymandering claims are not justiciable. In other words, courts don't hear them anymore. That's all gone, prior history. 6 years ago, the Supreme Court also said incumbency protection is up to the legislature, not us. So forget federal cases. All that's left is proportionality. How big are the districts? And the standard is a 10% variation. Remember that, 10% variation. And you should remember it because in 2021, the commissioners redistricted twice, not once. They adopted the 2011 maps, which were not out of proportion, not a single district, and then went on to adopt the 2021 map that the opponents of this measure are trying to maintain because it is a gross gerrymander. It moves all sorts of voters from the South Eugene area where I've lived for 55 years to Springfield and East Lane, where they will determine the outcome of the election. That's why there's a corrective mid-cycle feature in my bill, just as there was in the League's. The League supported correction in IP 14, just as they did in Michigan, Arizona, and other places that have gotten serious about this. Now you say, well, what about the state court? Why don't the state judges fix it? The Oregon court, and I slightly disagree with this, has in effect held that there's nothing in the Oregon Constitution that prevents gerrymandering. There's a statute that's utterly toothless today. Chapter 188.010 prohibits gerrymandering, but there is no enforcement mechanism and no definitions and no determination of what evidence proved it. And in the most remarkable thing I've seen in 60 years is the fact that a measure favors an incumbent or favors a party is not evidence of intent. Anywhere else in the law, you're presumed to intend the logical and normal consequences of your act. So you produce a gerrymandered map, I'd say that was evidence you intended to gerrymander. The Oregon court says no. So when someone tells you a map's okay because the courts have upheld it, that's spin, to put it nicely. There's another word for it, but I'm not allowed to say that. Now, there's one more thing. I'm just going to push it for one bit. By law, the county commissioner position is nonpartisan. You tell me why a partisan process would lead to a nonpartisan commissioner. You can decide for yourself how they do being nonpartisan. You can study the 3-2 votes and so forth, and decide who's being partisan and who isn't, and vote your conscience. I do not believe it's possible to live up to the goal of a nonpartisan commission by electing them in a partisan fashion. And it matters more with a commissioner than anywhere else. It's the only person in Oregon who's permitted to make the law, apply the law, and judge the outcome. In other words, no separation of powers at the county level. That's why they're nonpartisan, and that's why this measure should be put in the charter by the people and changed only by the people, because it's the only way that citizens will pick their representatives instead of the incumbent office holders picking their system, their voters, by drawing the lines to suit their purposes instead of the purposes of having a non-partial, impartial administration at the county level. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Commissioner Lori Trieger. Thank you to the City Club for this important opportunity to share facts with voters about this important topic and to shine a light on what is really at play. Are independent redistricting committees a good thing? Absolutely yes. I'm such a fan that in my first year in office, we put in place, in time to do the most recent maps, an independent redistricting commission. And these maps are based on the current census data. Might there be room for improvement to the existing committee structure? Yes, again. But passage of this measure will take away any opportunity to make changes that could add stronger protections, increase citizen participation, or create a better experience for our community volunteers. The claim that this measure is about independent redistricting is a fallacy. They can try to package it as reform, but when you unwrap that package, you see it is gerrymandering, plain and simple. In fact, the story of this measure tells a tale as old as time. It's about insider baseball, improper influence, and backroom deals. You've heard the county's charter referred to as our Constitution, making it the people's document. But let's be clear. The redistricting amendment on your ballot this November is anything but of the people. So how did we get here? Over a period of nearly 2 years, we held an open and transparent charter review process, as you heard from Morgan Monroe. We were fortunate to have dedicated community volunteers serve on that committee. They worked diligently and in good faith, committing hundreds of hours of their time. County professional staff provided them with technical and clerical support and legal consultation, as well as advisement from our own county elections clerk. This hard-working group presented their work in a report, you can see it online, to the Board of Commissioners. They recommended the 3 repeals you heard about earlier, which we unanimously agreed to put to you, the voters. They also asked that we consider adding our current existing independent redistricting committee into the charter. But the current board majority voted no to that option. Fine. We still get to have the committee, even without it being in the charter. And they could have stopped there, but they were not satisfied. Instead, at the very last minute, my conservative colleagues opted to move a backroom deal to the front of the line, a deal drafted by private attorney Stan Long. The mechanics of how Mr. Long's proposed committee would actually work are deeply flawed and raise many questions about equity and fairness, though they do have some merit. But those flaws are secondary to the most concerning aspect of the measure, which is that it calls for redistricting or redrawing commissioner maps next year, when there is no population data to support doing so. District maps are required to ensure fair and equal representation, 1 person, 1 vote. For Lane County, that means about 76,000 people per district. Our current maps were drawn and adopted in 2021 through a thoughtful, democratic, public process. The population variance district to district is now less than 1%. 1 person, 1 vote, equal representation. They follow all the standard requirements and best practices laid out by the Secretary of State. They are accurate and defensible. Since their adoption in 2021, they've not faced any challenges, not from Mr. Long, nor any of his attorneys, and not from the public. We've conducted an election on these current maps, and the results of that election were not contested. Gerrymandering is when someone tries to influence electoral maps based solely on a result that they don't like. To change county district maps next year out of the normal cycle with no new population data to support it would constitute gerrymandering. The only reason the current board majority is asking you, the voters, to pass a measure requiring off-cycle redistricting a mere 3 years after the last maps were adopted is to influence the outcome of the 2026 election, which, not so coincidentally, will include commissioners who championed this rush job of a measure. They don't want to have to face you, voters. They don't want to stand for re-election on the current maps. Mr. Long and his attorneys had the same access to our charter review process as any one of you, but they chose not to engage with that. Over the nearly 2 years of charter review work, neither he nor his attorneys sent us any emails or bothered to present public testimony at one of the many, many public meetings of the Board of Commissioners or the Charter Review Committee. They engaged in exactly none of the transparent public process. Why? Because apparently they didn't need to get what they wanted. What Mr. Long and his attorneys did is to leverage their unique and extraordinary privilege to jump the line. They used their access to certain commissioners to make an 11th hour bid and push their preferred version of redistricting onto your ballot, a version that includes this extra redistricting in advance of the 26 elections. The Charter Review Committee offered to take the time needed to work on this measure and make it better, to make it more workable, more functional. 3 commissioners refused the offer, and instead, as a board, we had a mere 15 minutes to review the proposal before taking a vote on what is now appearing on your ballot. There was no public hearing on the measure on your ballot. This measure is a bad idea. It will be expensive and challenging to implement. It is untested and unprecedented. It blatantly ignores the advice of staff, dedicated volunteers, and the dozens of constituents who've spoken out against it. It has nothing to do with county priorities. It doesn't build us a single new house. It doesn't put more deputies on our roads. It doesn't protect the environment or create one new treatment bed. It doesn't raise a penny of revenue. In fact, it will cost you, the voters, tens of thousands of dollars. In conclusion, remember, not all independent redistricting committees are created equal. If you value fairness, good public process, and citizen involvement, vote no. If you don't want to see your tax dollars wasted on politically motivated special interests, vote no. This strategy is right out of the National Conservative Playbook. Please don't be fooled. Don't help them rig the system. Vote no. You can go to nogerrymander.com to learn more, and you will see there a list of respected local leaders like former County Commissioner and Congressman Peter DeFazio, State Senators Przansky and Manning, State Representatives Lively, Nathanson, Fahey, and Holvey, along with dozens of other local elected officials, your friends and neighbors and community leaders who stand against this unfair, undemocratic, and unnecessary measure. Thank you.
Greetings. My name is Terry Parker. I'm the president of the League of Women Voters of Lane County. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the League, we are a nonpartisan, grassroots organization that works to protect and expand voting rights and ensure everyone is represented in our democracy. I'm here today to tell you that while the Lane League wholeheartedly supports the establishment of an independent redistricting commission within the Lane County Charter, that, unfortunately, we're strongly opposed to Measure 2362. In a nutshell, an independent redistricting commission must be truly independent and allow for a diversity of voices to be at the table, including minorities and communities of interest that have been traditionally shut out. When and why redistricting occurs matters and should not be at the whim of elected officials who, for whatever reason, just don't like the map. That should be up to us, the people of Lane County, to decide. Where the details live, whether in the Lane Charter or in Lane Code, matters. It costs taxpayer dollars to have to put changes to the charter to a public vote every time you want to make a potentially housekeeping change. And election integrity is paramount. We should be listening carefully to the expert in the trenches that do the work on the ground every day. And process matters. If someone of influence can step in and do an end run and circumvent an acknowledged, well-run public process that puts all citizen involvement efforts in jeopardy, it breaks trust. A truly independent redistricting commission takes the process of redistricting out of the hands of politicians and into the hands of voters, making the process much more transparent, fair, and inclusive. And that is what we should be striving for here. We didn't make it. When and why? The Board of County Commissioners has determined by a 3-2 vote, quote, that it is in the public interest and benefit to offer voters the option to approve an amendment to the Lane County Charter that would enshrine in the charter a Citizens Redistricting Commission empowered to prepare a redistricting plan. Well, that sounds great. I could go for that. But here's the rub. It goes on to say that, quote, for the 2026 general election and thereafter in conjunction with the release of federal census data. The single most important question you should be asking yourself today is why now? What's the motivation in Measure 2362 that would allow, again, quote, the adoption of district boundaries by at least 6 months prior to the 2026 general election? That is the catch. The measure mandates redistricting county commissioner maps in 2025, just 3 years after we went through the process. You've heard this. This is not the Charter Review Committee's recommendation, but a last-minute insert into the process. If that raises eyebrows, it should. A good number of citizens testified to this very issue in meetings in June and July, and I see some of you in the room. I went back and looked at the archive and listened to those testimonies firsthand. You can too. It's there. It's in the record. Don't take my word for it. All you have to do is go to the Lane County website and listen to the archived meetings of your commissioners to hear who is interested in changing district maps. Where the details reside, whether in the Lane County Charter, in Lane Code, also matters. Election costs taxpayers money. Redistricting costs money. As the Charter Review Committee recommended, putting details in code rather than in the charter allows for nuanced improvement of the process over time, rather than having to go back to an expensive vote to make housekeeping changes. We should be able to improve and learn from our experience over time and get better. In the most recent redistricting process completed in 2021, based on the 2020 census, for the first time, a Lane County Independent Redistricting Committee was empowered to do this work, instead of it being done by the county commissioners themselves. The pandemic made it extremely challenging. We now have more insight and experience. The county charter serves as a governing framework for our county government, much like a constitution. Such specific language does not belong in the charter. This will soon be obsolete. And of course, election integrity is paramount. The League has very high regard for Lane County election staff, and especially the Lane County clerk. These are the people charged with voter registration, administration of federal, state, and local elections within Lane County. That team is committed to conducting fair, accessible, secure, transparent, equitable, and reliable elections. The job is daunting and increasingly complex. Many of the people doing the work are brand new. There are serious concerns about the impact of the timeline for conducting another redistricting process on election staff. Listen to the county clerk. And process, of course, matters. If the hard work and diligence of the Lane County Review Committee, who worked for a year, offered public comment at every meeting, and followed a good public process and been honored, we would not be having this conversation today. They completed their duties nearly 1 year ago. The process here is certainly not transparent. It's expensive, it's unnecessary, and out of sync with the census data cycle needed to do redistricting right. The resulting district boundaries that are in use today have never been challenged. You heard this from Commissioner Traeger. And let me repeat, there's no new data. The next opportunity for applying this new census data is 2031. The League is extremely disappointed. Having to spend time and money that could go to better, more immediate needs is discouraging, to say the least. And in closing, thank you, Eugene City Club, for offering a forum for voicing these different takes on Measure 2362. Democracy is strengthened by this kind of civil discourse. I thank you all for being here. You can find the League at lwvlc.org. And if you're interested in joining us in opposition to Measure 2362, go to nogerrymander.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our panelists. We did invite the clerk of Lane County to participate, just so everyone knows, but she said that because the measure is on the general election ballot, she was not going to comment on it at this stage. We'll begin our question and answer in just a moment, but first I'd like to thank the business and in-kind sponsors whose support helps to make City Club possible. Thank you to our gold sponsors, Network Charter School, Hudson Dental, Luvis Cobb, and LTD. Thank you also to our in-kind sponsors, KRVM 91.9 Radio, Dotson's Photography, Pack Info, and Kid Sports. A special thank you to our award-winning public radio station, KLCC FM 89.7, for airing City Club programs Monday nights at 7 p.m. For those listening at home and in the car right now, your household is one of several thousand tuning into City Club on KLCC, and we love that you're here. You can find all recent City Club programs archived on KLCC, as well as on our YouTube channel and as podcasts. We'll take a brief break before returning for our question and answer session.
thank you. Thank you, City Club. We are back for our Q&A. And to make sure everyone has a chance to answer every question, we've asked our panelists to do their best to limit their answers to a minute. So, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. My first question will go to Stan Long, and then I'll have the rest of the panel answer as well. To start out with, I wanted to talk to the redistricting process that we had 3 years ago and the maps that are in use today. I wanted to ask each of our panelists how they feel about that process, if they feel it was fair, how we got the maps, and how they feel about the current maps that are in use today. And Mr. Long, I'll have you start out.
The 2011 maps were in compliance with federal law. The county readopted them when it began the process. They should have ended there and gone until there was a need to change them. Instead, they adopted the new 2021 map and delayed it until after the 2022 general election. That's a small point. I just want to make one clear point. Our proposal, after a correction due to how 2021 was handled, outlaws by charter mid-cycle redistricting for everybody, period. Right now, you can redistrict as many times as you want, as often as you want. The arguments are just noise. My proposal and the official explanation of the ballot says, we stop it. It'll never happen again. It's worth having citizens drawn by random look at this question. They may not change a thing. They may change it.
I'm going to have, if you could pass the mic to Terry to answer the next question. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Do I answer the same question?
Yes, please.
Yes. So if you recall, in 2020, 2021, we were in the middle of a pandemic. And what occurred is census data came out late. So it really complicated the matter of doing redistricting based on the 2020 census information because it wasn't here. And my understanding is that the commission needed to ratify something, so they ratified what was already in existence. And then when the 2020 census data was available, they were able to do that. We sat in on those committee meetings. The League of Women Voters was not a member of the commission, but we sat in on those meetings. There was mapping expertise, there was legal review. It wasn't an easy process, and next time will be better and won't be under the same conditions.
Thank you for the question, Rebecca. As was mentioned, the COVID-19 pandemic delayed the federal government from releasing census data, and that's what we use to ensure population fairness. But best practice on redistricting is more than just equal numbers of people in each district. It's also about the districts have to be contiguous, right? Borders touching. They have to utilize existing geographic or political boundaries, so House districts in the state and city council wards and so on, not divide communities of interest, be connected on transportation links and corridors, and be of equal population. So this notion that we redistricted twice is false. We had to comply with the rules. So the order that we passed, 21-03, you can look it up, was solely for the purpose of compliance because of the delayed census data. We only redistricted once in the normal 10-year cycle. There is no accountability in this measure. The current redistricting independent committee is charged with creating no greater than 4, no fewer than 2 maps, and then the commissioners adopt from their maps. So an independent committee draws them, the commissioners adopt them, the commissioners are accountable. In this situation, the committee will disband and you will have no recourse if you don't like the map that this group of randomly selected, which is not equitable, people draw a map.
So I have a somewhat nuanced answer because I was the chair of the redistricting effort last time that we did it. And you're like, why am I doing both these things? Because it's really hard to find community members who are willing to give up tens or hundreds of hours to these efforts. So I want to own up to that because otherwise it sounds hinky what I'm about to say. The committee got to work in August. The maps, in order to be entered to be used for an election, have to be 6 months in advance of that. So the committee had mere months to go through the redistricting process during a pandemic, and this 18-member committee met over Zoom. They had 2 meetings a week for most of the work that they did. I think, considering the constraints and considering the census data, it was late. The Trump administration, you may have read about some of their approaches to census data collection, and it presented some really unusual challenges. And so I think that's the space where we had an independent redistricting committee. It's interesting that they want another independent redistricting committee who might be more favorable.
And then my next question is specifically for you, Mr. Long, talking about, I think the most controversial aspect of this proposal is the 2025 redistricting. It took a lot of resources to redistrict the previous time and a lot of volunteer time from community. There was a lot of work to get public participation. Why does it have to happen next year? What's wrong with waiting until the next batch of new data?
The committee that's called independent, which I wouldn't use that term, it's euphemistic when you have people who are interested in the outcome drawing the maps. At the conclusion of the deliberations, an ethics complaint was filed because the person who was considered to be the author of the map that was adopted that moved people from where I live to other parts of the county was charged with a conflict of interest. That case was dismissed, as it should be. The basis of the charge was that he'd received $108,000 from 2 campaigns and was therefore interested in the outcome of the maps. The reason why the charges should be dismissed is there was no standard. There's no prohibition on having your own campaign manager, your cousin, your uncle on the committee as it's drawn now. We don't do that with juries. You can't have any confidence in why it's done. So the first change that we're proposing is to put some standards about who can serve. It's that simple. And remember, all this noise about mid-cycle, the only proposal before you, and I have made this proposal twice, backroom deal my foot. I proposed this in 2020. They ignored me, as is the usual case with outsiders. I can show you the correspondence. We put it before them. They ignored it. So I brought it back up again. 4 years later. That's how quick and sudden and backroom it was. I don't know any commissioners. I just met my own. I have no relationship with them other than I've sued them 3 times since I've been retired and have won all 3. So I'm probably not their favorite person. But there are some things up with which you just don't put, even if you're retired. I could tell you those stories, but that's not the point.
I wanted to just clarify, why does it have to happen in 2025?
Why would you run elections on maps that you know are polluted? Delaying justice is denying justice. Why does the League have a corrective redistricting in its proposal for the entire state? For the exact same reason. Why is that the law everywhere except here, where we need it the most? Because this is supposed to be a nonpartisan exercise. Okay. You can't get partisan politics out of the courthouse fast enough. Why put it off? You want to run 2 or 3 more elections when you have no confidence, none, that it's fairly done.
All right. And this next question is going to be for all of our panelists. We've heard a couple of people raise concerns about the structure of this proposed independent redistricting committee. Who is allowed to be on it? And so I wanted to ask each of our panelists if they have to maybe elaborate on what those concerns are, and I might start with Ms. Monroe this time and then work our way down.
I'm finding the language of it because I have it somewhere in my nice here folder. Do you have it? May I have it, please? Thank you. Great. So who's allowed to be on it is anyone who is a registered voter in Lane County. Who is not allowed to be on it is anyone who's a holder or candidate for federal, state, or county office, an officer or director of a campaign committee for one of those candidates, a paid consultant of a political party or office or employee, a registered lobbyist, a county employee or an employee of any local government that uses the maps. So right now that would be LCC and Lane ESD as well. And then a legislative or campaign contractor or staff of that contractor. Many of the people there have been concerns raised about are actually not disqualified under the way this measure is written. If somebody were to turn in their notice the day before the applications were due, they could be included. A spouse of a commissioner is eligible for this, the uncle, the neighbor, and then anyone who is eligible and not disqualified, their name goes in a hat and would be pulled out.
There's a lot more than a minute allows to address, but I have to state that the membership of the existing committee is not static. The structure is. And again, if there's a need for improvement or opportunities to do even better, which I agree there are, we don't have that opportunity if we put this in the charter. So again, the question before you voters is not necessarily do you think this proposal is good or not, or independent redistricting is good or not, or whether we should redistrict off-cycle or not. It's whether we embed it in the charter. The reason this is coming before you, the conservative majority on our current Board of County Commissioners could have just done this. They could bulldoze it and they know it. They could have done it through code, but they knew that would look very bad for them. So they're pushing their dirty work off to you to do it for them. We can seat new people on the next independent redistricting committee. We can put stronger protections in. I advocated for, and we did redact the primary identifying information of applicants so that we wouldn't know who they were. There's opportunity to do that even better because you can sleuth around and figure out who it is, of course. But each commissioner has the same opportunity to select one person. Those original 5 select the remaining 10 plus 2 alternates from the same pool of redacted applications. That's the current situation on our independent redistricting committee now. And again, they draw a number of maps, they present them to us in rank order, and we must adopt one of the ones that this independent committee drafted.
I need to make a really clear distinction when the name of the league is thrown out. The League of Women Voters of Oregon has a statewide goal for independent redistricting at the state level. This language is copied from an older version of what the League of Women Voters of Oregon would put into a state redistricting policy. So although it's nice that you like the League's language, putting it into a Lane County it's too big, too much. And suggesting that the League, without determining the League of Lane County and the League of Oregon being different and having different purposes, we deal with local issues, is disingenuous. I know the person who wrote this. If he reviewed the entire measure, you can't just cherry pick a piece of a measure, putting it into something else, and say that the league supports it.
And if you have anything you wanted to say about the structure of the committee and if you would like to respond in a minute too.
Classic is the classic structure used throughout Oregon for excluding from important functions people who are interested in the outcome. There's nothing unusual about it, and it is a compliment to the State League that we like their idea of making a corrective review before you get off on a better footing than we've had. I would submit, because the county commissioners have all 3 powers, that it's more and are required by law to be nonpartisan, It's a nonpartisan office. We ought to elect them in a nonpartisan fashion. Otherwise, what's at stake is you face a body that can make the law, apply it to you, judge you, all in one officer, no separation of powers. And Oregon is otherwise extremely strict on this point. Our Constitution says no officer in any one branch of government shall exercise any power of another branch.
And Mr. Long,
That's why we built this structure so strictly.
all right, I'm going to have everyone answer our last question in under 30 seconds as possible. And, you know, early on in the charter review process, I think one of their guiding principles was we need to draft proposals that stand the test of time. I'd like each of you to quickly answer, do you feel like what's on the ballot right now will stand the test of time?
Starting with me?
Let's start with Morgan really quick and move down.
No.
Agreed with Morgan. This will not stand the test of time, nor potentially will it stand the test of legal challenges, which will be an additional cost to you, the voters, when Lane County faces those challenges, should you choose to pass this ill-advised measure.
We can do so much better.
But the point is, they didn't. I wrote the amendment to the Constitution that created the Oregon Lottery. It looks to me like it stood. This one's even stronger. This one's more appropriate for the charter. Protecting voters from politicians belongs in the charter. My friend and former colleague, Justice Jack Landau, has written a long piece, and you ought to go look at 106 Marquette Law Review, the work by Professor Williams. It's an easy read. You don't need to be a lawyer. It goes into all kinds of interesting things that have happened here in Lane County with my good friend, Senator Prozansky. It will tell you all about what the rules
And
are.
Mr. Long, that is all the time that we have. Thank you so much to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to City Club.
This has been our September 20th, 2024 conversation at the City Club of Eugene. There's lots of things going on in town this coming week. Thursday evening, the Churchill area neighbors are hosting a free citywide in-person healthcare forum at the Willamette Christian Center. That's at 6 p.m., featuring a panel of elected officials and leaders from local healthcare providers. And on Monday night, the Eugene City Council will meet to discuss, among other things, the potential acquisition of land along Coburg Road for affordable housing. So get out there in the community and make your voice heard. City Club will be back next Friday when we're fortunate to welcome the two leading candidates to be Oregon's next Attorney General for a candidate forum right here at Wow Hall. Thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful weekend.